lot of people end up going through this. In fact, most people who are dating are probably going to go through this. With ADHD, everyone's a little bit different too. So what works for me may not all work for we. Therapists are ironically in real life some of the most judgmental and bullies. That period where you're happy, it's going to last longer, probably longer than other people you even know in your life. The biggest thing that I find is if we can regulate impulse control, we can regulate the intensity of your emotions.
Hi, besties. Welcome back to the Single Besties podcast. Today, we are in for a treat. Put your glasses on. We're going to take some notes. We have the ADHD therapist, Justin Gillespie, here with us today. Thank you so much for being here, Justin.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
How did you get started doing ADHD therapy? And I love how your main focus is to help people that overthink, because that is me. That is my audience. That is my target. So what made you start doing that?
Yeah, so I kind of just started doing it kind of totally on accident. So I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 5, and I have the classic situation of you get the ADHD diagnosis and the parents just don't agree with it. They're like, we don't need to medicate him, we don't need to do all that, and we're just going to figure out how he works. And that worked really well for me up until I turned 18, where the world isn't necessarily always so accommodating to you, right? So I basically went through life. I had no roadmap. I had no real thing to go off of, and I was struggling significantly going into adulthood, despite previously excelling very well, because clueless to me and my little 10, 12, 14-year-old brain, right? Everybody was just kind of overly accommodating toward me without anything formal being in place for me, right? So on a personal note, that's how I got started with having ADHD. I get diagnosed again at 23 and learn all about my stuff at 25, and have a conversation with one of my colleagues at a specialty center I worked at the time. And we were actually talking about how there aren't any specialty centers for ADHD. Why is that? And so I just kind of did the classic hyper-focus, where you just business plan out everything. And, during this time simultaneously, at any job I get, I was also getting the ADHD clients without trying, because they just realized I worked really great with them. So it just kind of worked out, even though I didn't know I had ADHD, or even when I did, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And yeah, fast forward, I think it was 3 or 4 years, and, hyper focusing on it, and then letting it go, and hyper focusing again, and business planning several times, we created an ADHD therapy practice finally. So I have been working exclusively with people with ADHD for, I want to say 2.5 years now. And then before that, I would just get them at any place I ever worked anyway, just because it just kind of worked out.
No, that's amazing. And it's so special what you're doing. And I love that you're coming on here, and we're going to talk about ADHD and dating, because I feel like it's dating nowadays, especially post pandemic, is already a challenge, but dating with ADHD is its own challenge. I kind of got diagnosed later in life, so I've been trying to learn myself and learn why I was the way I was. So I didn't realize until recently how much it can kind of play a role into dating. So guys, the first topic I want to talk about is hyperfixation. It's a big part of ADHD, especially in the early stages of dating. How does that impact romantic relationships, and what challenges, kind of come up when that initial intensity fades?
Yeah, so I mean, with hyperfixation, it is very much, it's honestly, I think you see it the most in dating, to be honest with you, because with hyperfixation, a lot of times what happens is it comes up when something is new with ADHD. So this is new hobbies, new video games, really just new anything, right? So there is nothing more fun and exciting than being with a new partner, especially if you like them, right? If you don't like them, not so much. But, once you get past that first date, you enjoy them, you really want to get to know this person, and you really want to focus a lot of your energy on this person. And that can come with a skew of problems, just because of the euphoric factor. So I actually just started using this new term that I'm practicing saying recently. But if I'm the one who came up with this idea, it is mine, and I'm trademarking it. And it's called affection, approval, euphoria. Basically, it's the exact opposite problem of rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, right? So with rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, or RSD, you're getting people who are either rejected or recorrected, and they are feeling that rejection or that negative feeling, but into a very intense way, to the point where it causes depression, anxiety, sometimes even mild physical pains, can make you sick, all that kind of stuff, right? The exact opposite problem comes with the approval euphoria, which is where you get so happy and you get so filled with dopamine that you ultimately become stupid, and you kind of leave friends and family and your job behind a little bit, and you just kind of let everything whatever, because over here is true happiness and this is real love, and it causes a skew of problems. Now, a lot of people end up going through this. In fact, most people who are dating are probably going to go through this, if not once, multiple times, right? So, what kind of happens with neurotypical people, I'm finding, is they have that period and it slowly transitions into a contentment level before it either just decides, yep, you're the one, or the relationship falls off, right? With ADHD, I'm finding the euphoric period actually lasts a lot longer, but then what kind of happens is like there's a sharp shift that falls off eventually. So you're very, very happy with this person, you're super in love, you're going through things and things are going great, and then suddenly either you just do not like this person anymore, or they're getting on your nerves, or you just feel very like rejected by this person, right? That's usually the period where the neurotypical people who are both neurotypical, right? They will, and we're talking about monogamous relationships here. It gets into a whole separate thing if you're in a polyamorous relationship, something like that, right? But it's like that's the part where they just kind of coincide with each other and kind of compromise. You're going to have one partner who's neurotypical, the other who's a neurodivergent, and the neurodivergent one's going to take things a lot more to heart. And then if you're in a marriage like mine, where we're both neurodivergent, we both have ADHD, it can get really emotional, but really fun still, right? So it's just one of those things where that period where you're happy, it's going to last longer, probably longer than other people you even know in your life. Um, and so you're going to feel like you found the answer to everything, probably, right? And then things are going to fall off and you're going to feel really bad about yourself. So the reason I say all this is, first of all, don't feel bad about yourself if things just start falling apart, and it's probably not your fault. You're probably just not compatible is all.
Is that why sometimes the 3-month relationship you have with someone hurts you a bit harder than it would a neurotypical person, because they're like, well, it wasn't that much time, but like you were so invested. Does that play a role?
Absolutely. I mean, even just hearing that 3 months, like that's a whole season. That's from spring to
Yeah.
summer. So in my head, immediately, even now, I'm just like, oh my God, that is kind of a long time ish, right? Even though in the grand scheme of things, it's not. But, to you, like to a neurodivergent person, that could be absolutely devastating for this to be going so great for weeks on end, because we tend to just pick things up and focus on it for a week or two and it goes away. So this thing is lasting longer than that. It's like, okay, something had to have been wrong. And usually that results in us feeling like we did something wrong intensely. When, if you look at how relationships work, 80 to 90% of the time, neither one is necessarily like the bad guy, quote unquote, right? Sometimes they are, but most of the time, no one's the bad guy. It's just you two just weren't right for each other, but then we interpersonalize that a little too much.
Mm. So, like you were mentioning, rejection and small misunderstandings can feel very overwhelming for people with ADHD. How can they manage their emotional regulation and avoid spiraling into those negative thought patterns when something dating and related doesn't go as planned?
So, when it comes to emotional regulation and ADHD, the biggest thing that I find is if we can regulate impulse control, we can regulate the intensity of your emotions. So, I have this method in therapy, and I recently gave it a name, and it's called the Pam Method. And the reason I call it the Pam Method, just fun little backstory, is I'm a big pro wrestling fan. I'm a big WWE fan. And there's a wrestler named Bailey, and I was looking through a bunch of different acronyms, right? And her name on TV is Bailey, and her real name is Pam or Pamela. And I was going through a bunch of different acronyms, what could work, and I saw Pam come up that made sense to me. And she's one of my favorite, wrestlers on the roster because she's just super awesome. And I was just like, oh, I like Pam. Pam is good. So that's going to work for me.
Yeah.
So, and it makes sense to it too. So Pam, or the Pam method, stands for pause, aloud, or out loud, but like aloud, and then move. So the P is going to be the most important part in this one right now for the purpose of what we're talking about. So when I say pause, in your interactions with your partner, I recommend a 2.5 to 3 second pause, pretty much before you say anything, especially if it's at the beginning of a relationship or when you're dealing with conflict, right? Now, how to implement this, because if you're doing a 2.5 to 3 second delay on everything, someone's going to be like, why are you pausing every time you speak to me, right? So
Yeah.
first things first is, if you're going to implement this, I would recommend just talking to your partner, letting them know this is what you're doing, right? I recommend open and honest communication. If you don't feel like you can be open and honest, maybe I'm a little biased, but I just feel like that's not the one for you. You get what I mean?
Hmm.
So if you have to hide it, probably not going to work anyway. But if you are going to implement this method and you tell them this, what's going to happen is the emotions that you're feeling, they're often triggered by the actions you're doing or the words that you're speaking. So when we're upset or flustered, we're probably saying a lot of things impulsively out the mouth. That's being reinforced into the brain, right? So when your brain hears sound, it's processing it as new information. So it'll actually strengthen that negative thought, but it can also strengthen those positive or neutral thoughts that you have too, right? So if you're speaking negatively and on top of it, you're moving frantically, right? Then your brain is saying, I'm frantic, I'm going to keep it up, and I'm going to elevate it. If we just pause for 1, 2, 3, what I have found with my clients when they're dating, when they're communicating with their partners, when they're trying to make big decisions on things, whatever the case may be, whether they're feeling angry or anxious or upset or scared, I notice that that feeling immediately gets capped, and oftentimes the feeling goes down by anywhere between like 30 to 60%, right? And how I figured that out is through rating scale. So I'd be like, what would you, your anger on like at like a scale of 1 to 10, what is your peak? They'll say an 8. A lot of people then will tell me when they do this, it's like, oh, it went from like that to like maybe a 3 or a 4 or something like that, right? So that's how I came up with those figures. But the more you're just able to pause and just not act and then doing something, right? So 3 seconds is a perfect amount of time to just cap it and not let it go, because then you get into the 4, 5, 7, 10, 20-second realm. And first of all, you're not taking action, you look weird. But second of all, it's just one of those things where if you're waiting too long, then you just feel like you're completely out of control and you're going to feel down to the dumps. So 3 is like 1, 2, 3, and then act. And then you're probably going to take better control of your words and your actions and your feelings in that moment.
That makes so much sense because I think the first, like, I never even thought about that, the impulse control, like, because you want to go to say something right away and it might not be what you actually mean or feel, but you're just going off impulse.
Exactly, right? You're going off of pure impulse, which means you're going off of pure feeling, right? So if your feeling is already out of whack and you're trying to feel better, but you're going off of the feeling, then you're just igniting the feeling to get higher and more intense. Versus if you just literally pause, like let everything slow down, let's let the brain slow down, let's let the body slow down, and then determine what am I doing next, right? And that next might not even be like the perfect solution, but it's probably going to be a lot better than what you were about to do or say.
Is that same method good for overthinking? Because I know, especially in the beginning stages, I find myself overthinking every text, every interaction. Would that pause method be really good for the same as rejection, or is there a different approach when dealing with overthinking, especially in those beginning stages of talking to someone?
Absolutely, right? So again, if you're in those beginning stages of talking and you're like, should I say this? Should I not? And you're just texting them back and forth, then just literally pausing for 3 seconds and then determining what you're doing from there. This is something that's going to let you have control over the situation. Now, if you're texting, this is where literally doing nothing can actually help you, right? Because instead of avoiding, you're making an active decision, right? So here's the difference between not texting them back right away to avoid versus not texting them back right away for an active decision. You get that text, you're flustered, what do I do? Okay, let me Pam it out a little bit. So you're going to pause, 1, 2, 3. You're then going to speak out loud and you're going to talk to yourself. A big part of my therapy is really talking to yourself and literally becoming your own best friend. And if you don't like yourself, which is a self-esteem issue, by the way, well, then you're going to have your best friend Pam with you. So you can even talk to Pam if you want. So if you talk to yourself or talk to Pam, be like, okay, Pam, I am not going to text this person back right now, and I'm going to go do my laundry instead. Because I need, and then here's where we get into I choose statements too. Because if you want to go take this a little bit deeper, because I choose to do my laundry in this moment, then huff over this because I want clean clothes for this date where I'm about to go on with him tomorrow anyway, and this is just not like really me getting flustered over this is not gonna whatever, right? So when you do an I choose statement, you are attaching the reasoning and the because behind it to something that you want to do. So that's just a little step further into that process you could do, right? But regardless of how you do this, you want to at least speak it out loud so that your brain processes it as different information. And then the final thing you're going to do is if you're choosing not to text him back in this example right now, you're going to move in the direction of whatever you've else decided. So if your laundry basket's like right behind you, you're just going to turn your chair around and face the laundry. Or you're going to just turn to the right where your laundry basket is, or whatever the case may be. You're not even going to get the laundry basket. You might decide to get the laundry basket, or as you're going toward it, you might do something else. The important thing is that I've now made an active decision, I've said it out loud, and I'm not letting this thing control me any further.
I love that. And I love how it's not a game, because sometimes I think people don't reply because they want to like make the person wait, but it's like, no, I'm choosing to put my mental health and focus on something else, rather than fixate on this, sending this text right now, and then when wait having that anticipation for a reply or something like that. You're choosing yourself first.
Absolutely. No, 100%.
I know you do have to go soon, so I just have like a couple questions, because you touched on the self-esteem and the self-belief, and I feel like you have to have that strong self-esteem in dating, because the rejection comes, all the things come, but I feel like people with ADHD, we kind of beat ourselves up, or at least I do. Like we know the things that are wrong and we kind of beat ourselves up. So what are some maybe strategies that you would encourage to, get that self-esteem up as you're dating and learning to love yourself and accept yourself for who you are?
Well, this is where the allowed part of my part of the method comes in place too, right? So by speaking kind things to yourself out loud, you are going to believe them further. So if you have a negative thought, let's go with the classic "I'm beautiful, I'm ugly" examples, right? So if you go with, "I'm ugly, I'm X, I'm Y, I'm Z," whatever the case may be, you tell yourself, right? If your thought is "I'm ugly," 9 times out of 10, the negative mean thought is always going to be more powerful than the positive thoughts that you're trying to convince yourself of. So you're going to have on this side this really loud thought that goes, "I'm ugly." You're going to have the smaller thought that's like, "I'm pretty," right? Well, the ugly thought is just going to swat that one away, right? No matter what you do, if you think it. But if you speak it out loud, your brain processes sound as new information, which then makes your psyche realize, oh, maybe I am actually beautiful. Maybe I am actually this. Maybe I am actually that, right? Now, the key to this is you have to say things out loud that you actually believe. Otherwise, they're going to sound disgusting, right? So if you don't actually believe you're beautiful, if you don't believe you're X, Y, Z, you're handsome, whatever the case you want to call yourself, right? You have to come up with neutral facts-based things to say next, right? So I know a therapist who specializes in eating disorders that helps people go from "I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm this and that" to, instead of saying "I'm beautiful," and going to the exact opposite route. They might say things like, "No, no, no, I am healthier today. My body is healthier than I used to be," or "I am more active in a healthy way than I used to be today." And you can't really argue with neutral facts, right? They're just facts about yourself. There's no way getting around them. They just are what they are. Whereas if you have a more positive affirmation that isn't true, that's still an opinion. That's just still, no, I don't see myself that way. I don't feel that. But if you can have a neutral fact about yourself, you're more inclined to believe it, which can still defeat that negative thought. But you got to say it out loud, and you have to believe it.
I love that, starting with something neutral, because sometimes it's hard to really go from hate, like being really mean, to like, I love myself. So, like, sticking, I've never heard it put that way. So, I love that. This is just a real quick question that one of the besties wrote on the Instagram sticker, because you did mention food and stuff. They asked, is there a diet that helps with ADHD? Like, is it coordinated to food intake? Someone asked that. But I was like, it's about dating.
I mean, you might have ADHD and you're on a dinner date with someone, and you might want to order something that enhances your ADHD a little bit. I would pro- I would probably say, as far as like a scientific proven lockdown, like this is the answer to one. No, you're gonna read a lot of stuff about red food dye and all that. That is not conclusive. That is not something that's set in stone. Some people say they help them. Some people say they don't. If you want to try it, go ahead and see if you like it. But it has not been proven set in stone, right? I would say that the best thing for ADHD is, instead of eliminating foods or substituting, add protein, because protein is a building block for our brain, which is going to help our executive functioning, our working memories, or whatever, right? So if you're someone who's like a pasta foodie like me, then get some, instead of getting fettuccine alfredo, maybe get chicken alfredo of some sort, right? And just have that chicken added in there. Or maybe have an extra protein shake in the day in addition to what you're eating, right? But the more protein you're eating in your day, the better your brain is going to think. It's going to have more clarity, and you're going to remember a lot more things more too, the more you do it.
I love that. I love that. Look at that. You might not want to order some red dye on your date because you might be bouncing off the walls. Just kidding. I sometimes want it. Anyway, so you just you just authored a book, Hire a Coach, Not a Tutor. Can you talk a little bit about your book, what inspired you to write it, what it's about, and the heart behind it and where people can find it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, you can get my book over here on Amazon. You
Oh,
can also go to my website temporarily if you're listening to this around the time we record it. So, on my website, and you can find this all on my Instagram. We'll have that in the show notes and all that. But you can get a signed copy of this book too if you're really that big of a fan. So, either one's fine with me. But the reason I even got this book written is I've been writing a book about my life and my experiences, just kind of in general, for about 8 years. So, since I was like 22, 23, somewhere in there. And it's went through about 8 years of work, and it's went through about 6 or 7 different rewrites to the point where it wasn't even the same book anymore. Half of it's because I didn't really accept my ADHD identity until like halfway through that 8 year process. So it was one of those things where I was like, oh, well, that's a big component of this. So I kind of decided to start shifting it up a little bit, and instead of making it more about me, I made it more of a book that has elements of me and has that like experience factor of like, yeah, like I understand what you're going through. But with ADHD, everyone's a little bit different too. So what works for me may not all work for we, right? So I wanted to have a book to just get people in their 20s started, to give them somewhere to just go and start and have a roadmap from somebody who understands it, but understands that maybe not every single thing that I write in this book is going to be for you. I always say that with this book. I hope that 70% or more resonates with you, but you might see a tip in here that may not work for you or you don't like or whatever, then that's fine. That's probably the tip you give your other ADHD friend and tell them, hey, maybe this will work for you. But just having a general good roadmap to go off of that's easily digestible, that isn't so clinically based, but still is backed up by research and evidence and science and all that, I wanted to write that. I think so many books about ADHD, they're either tailored to therapists or they're tailored in this way where it's super clinical and it's just really and like, so people who are actually going to benefit from the book don't want to we the ones reading it, right? I wanted something that was just very simple for us, that you could just absorb, take it. You could potentially read this in one sitting. You could break it apart. If you're like me, you'd be breaking it apart because I have dyslexia, so even if it was a short book like this, I'm breaking this apart. But if you're a really avid reader, you could read this in one sitting, and you could take it with you anywhere you go, and it has reference points that you can always reference. You can write all over it if you want, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's why I wrote this book, just because to give people with ADHD in their 20s, especially for people in their 20s. Yes, you can be older and get this book. I get that question all the time. But it's mainly for people who are in the biggest amount of transitions in their life. So if you think of your 20s, you're going to college, you're starting your career, you're dating, you might be getting married, you might be breaking up with someone, you might be getting divorced, you might be having a baby. Whatever the case may be, so many more things in between, but there's so many life transitions happening, right? That's why I wrote this book, because a lot of people with ADHD, we don't handle transitions well, and I just want something that was simple to read.
no, I love this, and I'm gonna get a copy because I want to read it. And that's what I love about you. Even your content, it's all funny. Like, it's ADHD and like therapy related, but you bring your personality to it. You make it digestible for people. So thank you for writing this. Thank you for being on the show. And we're gonna have to do a round two. I can already tell, because like I feel like we could just yap 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 for hours, and I still have questions. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me, for real.
Yes, and thank you for. Oh my gosh, we didn't even get to talk about this, but we got
Go ahead,
connected
go ahead.
because of we got connected because of the Chat GPT reel that I made that
Yes.
accidentally that I almost didn't post. And anytime anybody remixes my reel, it's never good. And so when I
Oh my
got the
god!
when I got the notification, I was like, "Oh god, he remixed my reel." But it was nice, so I was like, "Oh, finally, someone nice remixed it." But
Because
Chat
I just knew, just from my therapists that are out there, I knew as soon as I saw this, I'm like, these people are gonna have a cow and they're gonna tear her to shreds. And listen, I'm sorry out there. Like, I call myself the people's therapist because I really am for the people. And so I do have therapists that follow me, but not a lot of therapists like me, because I will say this. Therapists are ironically in real life some of the most judgmental bullies sometimes, right? And that's just being straight on facts, right? And so sometimes I'll see people, they'll see videos like that, and they take it so seriously. And so I just made a video where I was like, if ChatGPT is going to take my job, I'm probably not doing a very good job at this point in my
No,
career.
and I'm like, I miss Elizabeth so much. Like, I will be back to Elizabeth when I get my funds right, okay? But for right now, so that's, and I wasn't saying like I'm never going to therapy again. I literally
Yeah,
have a degree in psychology. I love
yeah.
therapy. I love these kind of
It's
things. So
expensive though.
it's so expensive, and yeah. So thank you for being nice on the internet.
No, no. I already, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh God, I already know what's coming. So let me just say something nice, because no, like, I get it.
No, this has been so nice, and I'm so glad we got connected, and I can't wait to chat again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. I love you. I mean it. Bye.